Woohoo, Diva community. It is episode 20, and I am celebrating that it's been over a year since Psychedelic Divas was launched. And thank you to everyone who has listened and provided such positive feedback. It has meant the world to me. To honor this milestone, I've got someone very special to introduce you to. I first met Amy Emerson after the MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference in 2023 at a private party hosted by a mutual friend. It was such a joy to get to know her and realize what a grounded, open hearted, lovely person she was. We connected on several levels, including psychedelics, and I was excited to learn that she lived locally. Over the past 2 years, we have been at many psychedelic gatherings, including a few that I've hosted, and we recently just cemented our friendship with a gorgeous hike on Mount Tam in my backyard. Amy has lived quite an interesting life, which has all come together to make her the beautiful, caring soul that she is. So that's my informal intro. Here's Amy's more formal bio. Amy Emerson is a respected leader in the field of psychedelic-assisted therapy. She was Lykos Therapeutics CEO for an important period in advancing MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress disorder as a drug with the FDA. Amy spent her early career at pharmaceutical companies where she contributed to the development of therapies in immunology, oncology, and vaccines. In 2003, she began volunteering with the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS, assisting with clinical research monitoring. Her expertise was instrumental in establishing MAPS clinical department and managing the MDMA Clinical Development Program. When MAPS founded its public benefit corporation in 2014 to develop and commercialize MDMA-assisted therapy, Amy was appointed CEO. The organization, later rebranded as Lykos Therapeutics, completed multiple phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials and raised a successful Series A, all working toward the goal of obtaining FDA approval for MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. Amy resigned from her CEO role in September 2024, and currently she's an advisor in the psychedelic research field. Amy, welcome to Psychedelic Divas.
Thank you, Carla. I'm so happy to be here. And that was quite a walk that we took, an unexpected 7-mile walk that we took. That was so gorgeous on Mount Tam.
It was gorgeous, and we were having so much fun. We just kept going. So I loved that. So, Amy, I just want to honor your commitment to the world of psychedelics. You've been a cornerstone in the psychedelic renaissance for decades. And I'm wondering what first awakened your curiosity about altered states of consciousness and their potential for healing?
Yeah, I would say that would be personal experience when I was in my 20s. I had a few experiences and I was already working. I was already a scientist and working in research. And so naturally curious about so many things. That's just kind of what led me into science was this natural curiosity. Um, and then looking into it a little bit more and like realizing there was a long history of psychedelics, but it kind of, this was in the early 90s. There was kind of nothing happening that I was aware of at that point.
All
And
underground.
yeah, all underground, not really any research. And so I kind of just assumed it would be that way. But in my mind, I was like, wow, somebody should be working with these amazing tools. This is, there's so much potential here. And then I just kind of tucked that away until the late 90s. And I went to a conference called the Mind States Conference that was held at the International House in Berkeley. The conferences were very small at that point, like
I
200
was at that
people.
conference.
You were at that, people. You were, yeah, at that conference. What an amazing conference, right? With John Hanna, and
John Hanna is an
so grateful.
amazing contributor to the psychedelic world. Yes.
So incredible. And coming into that room and being like, wait, there's still all of it is happening. And I lived, really close to that area. So I went to the first Mind States conference, and from that learned about the Entheobotany conference. It happened to be the one that was happening in Uxmal. And I was with my not yet husband, but became my husband. And I was like, we have to go to this. And we had never even taken a vacation. I think it was like $2,500 to go, which seemed like an immense amount to me. But I was like, we have to do this. And it was 10 teachers and like 20 students. Amanda Fielding was there.
Oh, Amanda has just passed, for those of you who don't know who she was. Let's just say she was literally psychedelic royalty. And
Acid
you,
Queen.
the acid queen, the countess, actually,
Countess.
literally a countess.
Yeah.
And the work that she did with the Beckley Foundation, I also met her at an ethnobotanical conference, but in Palenque, and
Yes.
spent some very, very fun, crazy evenings with her and her dear husband, Jamie. So I am sending just love to Jamie and her family right now.
Me too.
So
Such an inspiration, and so
amazing,
many
amazing
inspirational
woman.
people. So that was where I met Sasha and Anne and Terrence and Kenna, like this, Jonathan Odd and Paul Stamets and all this group. I mean, what this was like, I had no idea I was going to become part of the psychedelic research world, but I was so just in awe of these incredible people that I was getting a chance to learn from in a small setting. And so I just kind of kept being pulled along that path through other conferences like that, and just going to Sasha and Anne's to the farm. Once you were in, you got invited to Fourth of July and Easter, and it was just such a welcoming community. Everybody wanted to share their knowledge, and I just became more and more excited about it. But it still only seemed like research was happening in an academic setting, or not at all, or most things were going on kind of underground. And then in 2003, at one of those conferences, I heard Rick Doblin speaking,
Hmm.
and he said, I want to bring this back through the regulatory system as a nonprofit pharma company. And I looked at my husband, who I think was my husband at that point, yes, 2003, and I was like, I think I have to help him do this. It felt like a really powerful moment of, I got kind of hot and nauseous, and I just looked at him, and it felt like it just came from nowhere. I have to help him do this, and I'm going to be talking about it one day. And
Wait, can we just sit with that second for a second? I love those moments, and that is a soul moment where the soul just says, "Pay attention. We're doing this," and it just comes out of your mouth. It just is like, I'm going this direction." I felt that way when I learned about Ralph Metzner's work, and I was like, "That's what I want." Is that
yeah,
exact same? But I didn't get nauseous.
it was so powerful. And I kind of almost felt like afterward going, who said that? In fact, the part about me talking about it, I don't like to speak in public. I've gotten very used to it now. It doesn't
Mhm.
bother me, but it took a long time.
Mm.
And in fact, I feel like I even blocked that out. I had to ask my husband, Paul, later. I was like, did I make that up or did I say that? And he's like, no, you actually said that. And I was like, wow, that's how I know
Uh,
it was coming from someplace else, because I would have
yeah.
never said that. And I did. I went to Rick afterwards and I was like, you probably have amazing people helping you with this. And I just, in my head, I thought he had all these amazing researchers and doctors and lawyers and clinical
Not
research
yet.
people. And so I was like, oh, little old me, like, will he want me to help? And gave him my information. And a couple months later, he called me and he's like, do you know how to write a monitoring plan? And I was like, yes. So then that kicked me off for about 6 years on my nights and weekends. I just helped Rick as much as I could to start up these clinical trials. So that was how I got here.
I mean, first of all, the soul path is laid out, and then just dedication, nights, weekends. I mean, you've got family, a full-time job, kids. It's like
Yeah.
this is a lot,
Yeah.
and it's been a lot. I mean, I don't think it's ever not been a lot, probably.
It has always been a lot, but it was one of those things where I think I just took that moment was so powerful that it kind of left me unquestioning that this was something that could happen and that would happen, and that I just needed to keep taking a step at a time. And I always would say during this period of time, and still do, like, I just believe the ground is going to come up to meet us. We have
Yeah.
to take the step. We're going to hit roadblocks. It's going to be a winding path. And I never really thought too far ahead. Like, I'm like, okay, this is what we need to do now. This is what we're working on. And it was like that. So even though it was a lot when you take it like that, and you kind of naively do that, it seems okay. There was no big goal except for to keep taking the steps and to try to get this approved. But it didn't have a lot of other things attached to that idea. It was just that it was possible and we could do it, and we just would have to keep working through the system. And that gets you through a lot, that naive kind of positive energy. And Rick's so motivating and such a visionary. That also, right? You keep getting that influx of like, yes, we can do it.
It was a high, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay, so when I met you, certainly psychedelics were on a high because we are just coming off of the 2023 Psychedelic Science Conference and, heading towards, yes, legalization for MDMA and the skies would part and all would be fabulous. But then, at least for now, the FDA has decided not to legalize MDMA for therapeutic use. And I'm certain you've spent many hours analyzing what happened. And I firmly believe that we really never know what is good or what is bad, and that we're just still on this long medicine journey. But as you look back, what do you think went sideways, and what do you wish you had done differently?
Yeah. Carla, I say that all the time as well. Like, I really learned this lesson and I kept learning it over and over again of like, no, don't get caught up in as if what is happening right now is good or bad. Don't get caught up in the drama because you waste time, I think,
Hmm.
with that and energy, and emotional energy as well, with kind of getting caught in the drama of something. Because I think that everything is a very long arc. And I've just seen over and over things that I interpreted as like, this is great, or this is the most horrible thing that could happen. Like, it just has to keep unfolding. And it is still unfolding, and it is a very long arc. And we've made an incredible amount of progress to this point. And
Yes.
so it's easy to get stuck in those moments, but overall, this is going to happen. I mean, it's the cat is out of the bag. It's not going back. There's so many people involved. We have made incredible headway through proper channels that have allowed a foundation to be put in place that's going to help this to unfold. And it's going to happen in odd ways. Look at what's happening with the administration that we have right now that seems to be positive for psychedelics. Like, who would have expected that?
It does seem very
Um,
strange, yes.
Right. So I've really learned to kind of take that step back and try to see the long story of what's happening and kind of allow myself to like think about that and tell that story of what's happening and also kind of look to the past and learn from those past mistakes and allow that to come into how like the next step in the pathway is like what can we learn from this? And I think that there's I think one of the lessons is we started this all as a nonprofit. Rick was very clear this had to be a nonprofit. We wanted it to not be profit motivated. But you have like you have an ideal of how you want something to go.
And Rick is ultimately idealistic.
He's such an idealist, and it's great. You have to have that because that creates your true north, right? And the reason we needed it to be a nonprofit is because it's high risk. If anybody, and it was going to take a long time. Very novel, very stigmatized, and it was going to take a long time. If we would have had traditional funding at the beginning, traditional funders would have been fed up with us ages before now, and we wouldn't have been able to make this progress. It's also really hard to be the person out in front or the group out in front, right? It's like you're kind of laying the pathway for something that other people are going to build on top of. And you may not always get to be the one that where everything comes to fruition, but your work is helping to lift other people up. So one of the first things is I felt like the message we were getting from the philanthropists was you're de-risked enough. We should start putting our money into our philanthropy into other risky areas. You're de-risked enough. Go
Mm.
raise money in a traditional way. Well, I think that was getting ahead of ourselves. And Rick felt like that during that whole period of time. He was really hesitant for us to take traditional financing. And we tried to do it in a variety of different ways that were unique. And at some point, we just had to do a Series A. And that really changed things. And so I don't know that it's a mistake or something that I would change. It's what had to happen. Like if we wouldn't have taken that, I don't know that we would have been stalled anyway. So
Mhm.
sometimes the river is pushing you in a certain way and you kind of just have to go with where it's taking you. So there was that. I think that there's also with that idealism, there's also things that you need to get really clear on what is your priority and why and how are you making your decisions around that. So staying a little bit more focused into one area and this isn't the the traditional formula for how to get a drug approved is not going to work in this case, but there are things to learn from it. And so there's two pieces to this. One, you have to do some of the things the way it's expected that you're going to do it, like with the way the FDA would expect it, the way other pharma companies would do it. You kind of there is learning from that, and you need to follow some of that pathway. And on the other side of that, as we started to bring people in that really had a lot of experience in pharma, this also, I like to say, this animal does not behave the way you expect it to. And so the formula you are trying to apply does not necessarily work here. So you have to have people that are open-minded thinkers, entrepreneurial, like really, like creative, I guess, in the way that thinking to understand what parts to bring in that are kind of the formulaic pathway and how this is going to respond differently than that. And what do we need to do and what do we need to keep? It's just not the people coming in that have a lot of pharma experience don't necessarily know more than those of us that have been doing this for a long time and intimately know this program. And to be able to be discerning with that. And I think for me, one of the things I would have told myself is to trust my intuition much more with that. And to really push back on like, yes, I know you're very experienced, but this is not going to behave that way.
Right.
So those are some of my learnings.
So what I'm hearing is a confluence of uh, you tried to do things out of the mold. It needed to be done within the mold, but once you're in the mold, it doesn't fit the mold.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So making sure you have the right allies on your side to support that. And when we did take Series A investors, and thankfully we had people that really did believe in what we were doing and understand and stood by us. It's really important who you work with, the team that you build, how much you trust yourself, how much you are willing to compromise versus stick to an ideal. Like you have to have some real clear ways of informing those decisions.
Hey, fellow explorers. Thoughtful planning and preparation is the foundation of any successful psychedelic journey. And if something does go wrong, knowing how to navigate that difficult space is essential. That's why I wrote my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. It's filled with tips and tools for keeping you and your friends as safe as possible. You'll find it at our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Please, go get it, read it, and share it. The more we all know, the safer we can keep each other. I know one of the things that harmed Lykos's FDA application was the inappropriate sexual conduct of one of the clinical trial therapists with a patient. And inappropriate sexual conduct also took down the School of Consciousness Medicine.
Mhm.
And of course, there are innumerable instances of sexual misconduct throughout the non-medicine therapeutic world. So perhaps we have to admit that inappropriate sexual conduct is not going to just disappear in either the therapeutic or the medicine world. So, given that these medicines create these strong emotional bonds between therapist and client, what do you think we can do to mitigate these critical issues going forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we're going to eliminate them in this field, the medical field, or outside the medical field, that there's going to be these, this power dynamics and inappropriate sexual conduct or other types of inappropriate behavior that happen across all these areas, and especially in something that does create these connections, right? So psychedelics do make you more open, like you can measure that on an openness scale. And, they do also help you bond to yourself and to a therapist and to others. And so the relationships that you make during these and who you choose to enter into relationship with is incredibly important. But the practitioners need to do their own work, right? Like this is unhealed areas of the person that's the practitioner that are then coming in and harming other people. And so, how do we make sure that there's the appropriate training, the mentorship, but also that requirement to do your own work? Work with your shadow. The shadow, when you don't work with it, is going to come up and in ego or in power trips or in all these different ways. So how do we, I think having programs of mentorship and programs that ensure people are doing their own, they're doing their own work, and that they need a certain amount of time within that work before they also start working with patients is important. And I don't know how.
So let's talk about that because there's thousands of people have now been unleashed with psychedelic certificates.
Yeah,
And so yes, they've gone through a program,
right.
but they don't have what you just mentioned. There isn't that level of deep mentorship, time on the mat, and because that's all underground and that's illegal. So the programs can't actually, include that. But do you think people are actually prepared when they walk out with their certificate? How do we address this?
I think there's a big gap, and I'm not quite sure how to deal with it except for to make sure we're talking about it. And as an ecosystem of practitioners, like, this is not going to necessarily be the pharma companies that handle this piece, right? They're going to have certain requirements for who can deliver the drug, and they're going to have certain training that they do for the therapists. But this is the practitioner area where we can set the gold standard as the people that understand how these types of treatments should, what the training is that's required. But I think there's a gap there in that there are the certificate programs. People should be licensed. They've already gone through some type of mentorship with their own licensing, but this is like a specialty, I would say. And in the underground, and in the past, and even if you look past into traditional use, people went through long mentorship programs. People studied with someone for like 20 years, and there was like they had to be in there for years before they started to, by assisting, before they started working kind of then more as like a peer and then working on their own, right? And so how do we create that in the medical system? I don't have a good answer except for that as the practitioners, as the people that have the most experience doing this, we have to set the gold standard and create these systems. And then there has to be a way, in having somebody have a licensure, there's a way that then reporting can happen and that license can be taken away. There has to be a consequence if people are not behaving ethically. And then I think we also need to really
And
educate.
that's
Oh,
missing in the
sorry.
underground
That's, yeah, yes.
because right now
No way to
there's all
take it
kinds of
away.
things happening, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
People don't report it.
and
They're afraid.
they're not, yeah, because they don't want to say what they did themselves. The client doesn't want to say what they did. And they also don't, sometimes they're protective of the practitioner. They're like, well, if I say something, then they're going to go to jail. And people may just want that behavior to stop, but not have that huge
Yes.
consequence of,
Right.
oh, now
Too
I'm
much
outing this
consequence
person.
possibly. So
Yeah.
how is there a way that we bring people back into alignment, right? And so we need also, I think it's the other practitioners that are working together, keeping an eye out for each other, right? And making sure. So mentoring, I think mentorship is incredibly important. Practicums where you're actually working. And when this becomes approved, I think that will be something that we need to really think about. How does somebody work with someone more experienced than them instead of just diving into this? Even if they're an experienced trauma therapist, once you add a substance, I really think that there's another level of training that needs to happen and
Mhm.
another level of your own work that needs to happen. And then I think educating the people that are coming in for treatment, empowering them, knowing that there's a way for them to report or to talk about if they don't like the way something was going.
Well, and to also just which is what we're doing right now, amplify this is not normal. This is not part of the therapy. This is out of bounds. This, like really making it clear so that people know what to expect, that inappropriate touch it is not part of a therapeutic healing session.
Yes.
And then there's that slippery slope of, yes, but what's inappropriate? I mean, so
Yeah.
it shouldn't be slippery. It needs to be clarified.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And so I think talking about it, education on both sides, education on what to expect when you're going in for treatment, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, empowering people to trust themselves and their intuition, making sure that they have access to information about the practitioners that they would decide to go to, ask questions, and then for practitioners, whoever you're going to bring into your practice, have a good way of having peer support, of mentoring happening, and having a good way of clearing up things right as they come up. These are all absolutely doable things, but I do feel like there is this gap in, kind of a movement from the very experienced underground practitioners to a new sets of practitioners that do have above ground ways of getting educated, but it's going to be a while before there's above ground ways of people going through apprenticeships and where there's enough practitioners where this can all happen. It's gonna take a little while to evolve.
Yeah. And I think gap is the term because right now what's needed isn't accessible.
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of people who would like to fill that gap with actual hands-on or lying down on the mat trainings. And things are certainly happening in like Costa Rica and Jamaica and other things, but that's a lot of extra money and time. And you kind
Yeah.
of still have to like, wait, who's doing that? They're hard to find, right? And then everything has to be vetted. So we're really in a place where sadly, this what it was going to take, everything that you just described to fill that gap, it's not in process.
Yeah. I know that for all of our phase 3 therapists, everything was reviewed and they had mentors and they had feedback and they had like criteria that they were being measured on. And so they had these opportunities for feedback consistently and feedback and like opportunities to work with a mentor and then opportunities to kind of work within themselves. And it's been great. I've been talking to like a number of the Therapist Alliance folks that were part of our phase 3, and all of them are like, we want to stay in mentorship as long as possible, even if, the company was only going to require X amount of hours of mentorship. We feel like this is something that's kind of a lifelong thing. And I think that's also a sign of somebody that's very aware and therapist of the kind of therapist I would want to go work with.
Right,
So
exactly.
maybe it's like also
Okay,
educating the people that are coming in for treatment to ask some of those questions, like, how do you get peer support? How are you
right.
being mentored? What's your, have you done
Yeah,
your own work? And your
right.
own work doesn't necessarily even have to be psychedelic, but it's like in the past when people were getting their degree to become a therapist, to become a psychiatrist, they were required to be in therapy. And I
But
think that shift in
I
behavior.
disagree. I think they need to be required to have to be in psychedelic therapy.
Yes.
I
That's
mean,
just harder for me to say because like that's like a whole, yeah,
I can say it.
Yes, you can say it. I don't disagree with it, but like that's something that would be very difficult from the company perspective, right?
Right.
Because there needs to be a way for that to happen. And right now there just isn't. There isn't a structure that's set up that allows somebody that's going through their training. We did it through phase 1 studies. So the therapists that were going to be practitioners were able to, if they wanted to, enter a phase 1 study and have the experience themselves. Post approval, I don't know that's going to happen. How it will happen, I'm sure it will happen, and I think
Hmm.
it should. But I think the field is smart enough, and there's enough smart, strategic people in this ecosystem to figure it out and make sure it's happening.
Well, I know that early on there was definitely pushback in the therapy world saying, well, I prescribe Prozac and I don't take Prozac. Have we moved beyond that
Well,
limited
I mean, some people have. I
perspective?
mean, I've always been like, this is different. This is not a symptom management. This is a drug that's supporting therapy, and it's an experiential medicine. And it's opening up a lot of, like you're saying, there's this openness and this connection. And so you want to know that that practitioner understands that, understands what's happening, and has done their own work. I think there's another important part to it too, where a lot of times when people are in the experience, they're quite quiet for a
Hmm.
period of time.
Yes.
And therapists are trained to be doing. You're doing something and you're asking questions and you're getting the person to talk. And so you need to be comfortable with knowing that in that silence there's a lot happening and it's difficult to explain the insights, and especially if the person that you're treating doesn't kind of come out and tell you the insights that
Hmm.
they're having or what's going on in there. You're sometimes sitting for a very long period of time quietly, and so that takes some, you have to do some untraining of the therapist, but also they need to have that confidence of, that what they're seeing, what they're experiencing on the other side of it, that it's meaningful.
I think all of that makes total sense. And may it be so that this gap is filled in all kinds of meaningful programs and mentoring and deepening of personal use of psychedelics in the therapy world for the therapists, for the practitioners.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to, I'm assuming you learned a lot about trauma, including complex trauma from your role in MAPS clinical studies. So I'm curious, what healing do you think is available with the help of psychedelics that might not be accessible through traditional Western psychiatry?
Yeah, in order to touch on trauma and especially the complex trauma, you need trust. You need trust in yourself. You need trust in the set and setting that you're in, including the person that you're working with. And I'm going to talk just about PTSD
Mm.
specifically, and we did work with really severe PTSD. PTSD is just a state of distrust and not feeling safe. And that when you try to go to talk about your trauma, it is re-triggering. This is why you get a lot of people talk therapy, other types of therapy, prolonged exposure. A lot of these things do work. But the thing that creates people to drop out of those therapies is that when they go to talk about it, there is no safety in talking about it. And it's almost self perpetuating that you're just reinforcing the trauma if you can't get like through that barrier. So by combining something like MDMA with the talk therapy, you're creating that opening that needs to exist. So we call it sometimes a window of tolerance where you're not hyper aroused or hypo aroused, and you have the sense of safety where you can then touch in, talk about these memories, have some memory reconsolidation, some reopening of some critical periods, different pieces that are really helpful in allowing those memories to be kind of recatalogued in a way that you know you're safe and you can talk about them and they happened in the past, they're not currently happening. Because a lot of times for people with severe trauma, it feels like it's still really happening
Mhm.
in the moment. They feel like the trauma is ongoing even when it's clearly not, you know? And then for some people, it's really hard, like they are still in difficult or traumatic situations. And so that's another whole, situation that is complex to deal with. But I think that's what is helpful, is that there is something, these molecules also are so interesting. They're affecting your subjective experience and your emotional experience, while they're also affecting the activity in your brain and in your HPA axis. So they're kind of coming in on all fronts. To me, it's like hitting a big reset button
Mm.
and giving you this opening, this opportunity that is difficult to get to. That opening of that window is difficult to get to without the molecule on board. But again, these molecules are also a non-specific amplifier. This definitely didn't come from me. This is like something that we know from the field and from the wisdom of other researchers. And so it's really important that whatever you're amplifying for that person in the moment is a safe setting, a secure place to talk about it, and a way to follow up and do the integration. And so pairing these with the integration visits is also something that's just so important and can fit right into the medical system that we have. But it's just that usually you're going for talk therapy, it's like the same type of visit each time. This is going to be a different kind of intervention where it's then held by that intervention is held by the preparation and the integration so that you really get the opportunity to take advantage of these, critical periods of reopening of emotional and social learning and create different connections in the brain that allow you to know that you're safe and that you can change your relationship to the trauma that happened in the past, that it really is in the past.
So MAPS made the choice. They needed a diagnosis to prove to the FDA that MDMA had healing potential. So they chose PTSD. And then they made the additional choice to center veterans in the studies, which I think were very sound decisions. But those decisions meant, of course, that the world of the healthy normal was left out. And so, what I mean by that is that MAPS wasn't able to center how invaluable these medicines are for healthy people who don't have a psychiatric diagnosis. But, maybe they're just struggling with life's issues, grief, divorce, work stuff, child rearing problems. So, in a perfect world, how would you like to see MDMA used in a therapeutic healing context where it wouldn't just be for people who have a diagnosis?
Yeah, let me just back up for 1 minute in that it feels like we centered the vets, and we did because the vets became like the voice. they were able to open that door to the conversations in a way that many other people couldn't. But there was more women in our studies and more civilians in our studies than there were vets. So really
And
important
I'm,
for people to
yeah,
know that.
I was unaware of that
Yeah,
again because of what got amplified, and I know why it got amplified. It made
yeah,
all sense in the world to, bring on, something that they were politically both sides could fully support. But thank you
absolutely.
so much for clarifying that.
Yeah, and also we did find political support on both sides for women that had been abused, but it's just much harder for women to come out and talk about that. And so I think we think of the vets, we like to say like they wedged the door open so that more of these conversations could happen. And we really have been trying to allow women to feel more comfortable to come out and talk about what has happened to them and what their healing is. And I have seen that really change. It was really important that we had the vets in the study. Our initial studies really didn't have any vets in them. They were mostly women. In our phase 3, there was more vets. There was one study that was done as a phase 2 that was veterans and first responders because we needed to show that their results were not any different, that the type of trauma that you had didn't matter to the results. And that is what we saw. It was really that was really important. But everybody can relate to, I think, both our veterans and to most people know someone in their life that's had a traumatic event, whether it's a car accident, somebody, an accidental death or injury, or that they've experienced sexual trauma or violence. So there's plenty of, unfortunately, plenty of those people that need to be helped
Plenty of
and
trauma to go around, yes.
diagnosis. And I think that's the important place to start. The risk benefit there is just really a no-brainer. And I think as people get more comfortable with this, there probably will be other diagnoses that people have that will allow them to get treatment. And honestly, I think that all of us have trauma, and kind of unresolved trauma, whether
Hmm.
it's like it's like the big T or little t types of trauma. We all experience it and probably could benefit from having the experience of having one of these interventions and being supported and being able to talk through things that have happened in our life. But that's not what the prescription medicine system really is for these types of things. So um, I would not see there being a time in the medical system where you're coming in and doing this without some type of a diagnosis. Now, maybe the diagnosis can be something that's a little bit broader at some point. Some of the things that I'm interested in, though, are the really difficult to treat areas besides PTSD would be like eating disorders and postpartum depression. I think
Hmm.
there's some really interesting ideas out there for supporting people also that need physical therapy, that have had a stroke,
Hmm.
and that if you're reopening critical periods based on the work of Dolan,
Right.
like you could open different kinds of critical periods depending on the setting that you give someone the psychedelic in. So I do think the diagnoses are going to change and expand. There's some work to look at general anxiety disorder. We could probably, most of us could qualify for that.
I think we all fall into that. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't see. So really, this pathway is for people with a diagnosis, and I think and that's what I've been focused on for most of this time. It's not that I don't think
Yeah.
other people can benefit.
Well, we all know that because we've all been doing this work ourselves, so and know the benefit that we've gotten from it. But
Yeah.
all right, so you come from a scientific background. So my question is, have you ever witnessed or personally experienced a psychedelic journey that felt like maybe a conversation with the mystical? Like how do you hold both perspectives, the scientific rational mindset and the mystical ethereal worldview?
Yeah, I've definitely had experiences that feel more, much bigger than that, like touching into the creative power of our universe and information that's there. And I think just because we can't explain something doesn't, from a scientific perspective, doesn't mean it's not true. And I think that that's something I've seen, we've seen over the evolution of the scientific world is that a lot of times things that people didn't think were real, maybe think about herbal medicines and traditional wisdom, and those things were kind of discarded and then later on found out to have real value, right? So I think maybe we're just not sophisticated enough to understand our full world, and that psychedelics do feel like there are a way that we're tapping into whether it's our own inner knowledge or some type of collective information. I don't know. But I have had the experiences of really having insights, I think is what I would call them, of that these molecules are kind of master keys that allow us to, and in a lot of ways it doesn't matter which one, and that was kind of the message I got at one point, was like, doesn't matter which one, we just want healing. We want to unlock some healing to come into this world, and here's a way to do it. And these are master keys, and it's then it's how do we set it up, what's the specific thing that somebody wants to work on, how do we set up the right environment and the setting for this, and support a person through that. I mean, that information just felt so clear to me. It's not about any one of us getting it done. It's not about which molecule. It's not about what company. So my experience with it was more like that I felt was kind of towards that mystical experience, was this idea that these are master keys. They don't really care which one either. That there's a message of like, we want to bring more healing on this earth, because the earth needs it too. The environment needs it. We as people need it. If we can't connect in with our own spirituality, how are we going to be healthy and move forward? So those were really important messages for me.
Well, I think you're tapping into my next question a little bit, because I'm wondering, do you think that MDMA carries a specific energetic signature or spirit of its own? Does it have its own voice? And do you think that MDMA has its own agenda around becoming legal?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about it so much specific to MDMA. It really has been kind of this idea of that there is this healing potential. There are some keys that help with this healing potential, and we need a lot more tools like that, and that we should be working for the betterment and for the possibility that all of them are available. I would say each one does probably have its own kind of signature in the way that people respond to it, and MDMA happens to be one of those that's very heart opening. But people can have very heart opening experiences on all kinds of other with all kinds of other molecules, and they can have really incredibly difficult experiences with each of them as well. One of the things that we heard from patients a lot of times was, wait, why do they call this ecstasy? Because it's
Yeah.
hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard work what people are going through, and not everybody's ready for them. Not everybody's ready for these experiences and for these molecules, because it you have to do a lot of your own
Yeah.
inner work. You face your shadow, you face your trauma, you have a lot of support to do it. That's also the power of these, is that you are your own healer when that window is
Yes.
created. Everybody
Yes.
else is just there to support it. No
Yes.
one can take that away from you. You know internally, like, those pathways that need to be unlocked and what you need to talk about, what you need to experience in order to get to your healing. So I think all of them have the potential to do that. Do they all have a different feeling, tone, and touch? Yes. I don't know that there's a spirit to the molecule, and I think everybody just has their own way of expressing their experience, and some people are going to do it with language that's more scientific, and some are going to do it with language that's more spiritual or more mystical. Doesn't I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
Just get it done.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So looking back with perfect 2020 hindsight, is there a message that you would want to share with your younger self who was just starting out on this psychedelic odyssey?
It's going to take a lot longer than you thought. It'd be a little bit more of a windy road. But I think I would really, kind of going back to the message from the beginning of trusting your intuition, trusting
Hmm.
to put together the right team, trusting when
Yeah.
people come in with information, but also making sure that you're comparing that to your own experience and your own wisdom and knowledge of the program, and that it's going to be hard to marry these things. It's going to be hard to take this kind of knowledge that's been built over a long time, by a lot of people, and not in a traditional way of like through a clinical trial. It's going to take a lot of work to try and bridge these worlds. So be a translator, listen to all the sides, and try to find that kind of middle path that allows the different groups with the knowledge that we need to communicate with each other, and also get really clear on what's like, where's your line on compromise. What because this is not one of the things that's so clear and became clear to me along the ways. This is not going to go into the medical system the way Rick and I first talked about it and the way we imagined it.
Uh-huh.
It's not. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. Some of them are regulatory laws, some of them are medical practice. So, how do we get creative and still, like, what is the thing we are trying to do? Get very clear on that and understand there's multiple ways to make that happen, but where's the non-negotiables at? And I think if I could go back and help myself find those things faster, and just walk with a lot more confidence in them, that would be my advice to myself.
I think that's great advice for anybody. So, all right. What's your greatest fear around the future of psychedelic medicine?
That it becomes like a pill that you just give people and it becomes like an SSRI. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a push for that right now, and I think that would be a huge mistake. We'll lose the efficacy and we'll increase the risk.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And it's just not respectful of the history of
Hmm.
these medicines.
And it's not actually respectful of the person with trauma who,
Yeah,
is going to be navigating something that they don't really fully understand on their own without that trusting support that you talked about. So,
absolutely. Yep. Like, we have to prioritize the well-being and the benefit to the patients.
all right, it's 2025. So 2020, 2035, 10 years from now.
Oh boy.
What's your wildest, most heart-centered vision for psychedelic medicine? What does it look like in 10 years?
Hmm. I think it becomes that blend of the traditional way that we've kind of been talking about, that these medicines and the experience of these medicines are supported, the way that the practitioners are trained, the way that the patients have an opportunity to participate in this and have the right set and setting around them and the right support and the right integration. I think more group therapy, bringing the whole family in for the to help support the process and to
Mm,
get treatment
yeah,
potentially if they need it, because trauma is something
beautiful.
that happens, not to a person. It happens to the family, happens to the community, and it happens to society.
I love that.
So how do we open up to be able to see that the healing is also across all of these
Mm.
areas? So to me, in 10 years from now, if we are not just thinking about the individual and the medicine session, but we're thinking about this from that bigger picture, and we've created really good training and mentorship programs and group therapy programs and family programs that are supported by our insurance and by our medical system, that would just be beautiful.
Supported by insurance.
Yeah,
That's a big one.
yeah,
Allowing this to really, truly be accessible.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what's next for you, Amy? I know you are deeply listening for your next direction. And I'm
I am,
wondering, what does
yeah,
deeply listening look like?
I am joyfully saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's next. And it feels good. And like, I don't, that's not a stressful place for me to be. It's where I chose to be. When I stepped down, I assigned myself a few things. One was, don't make any decisions for the next 6 months. It was good advice I was getting from a lot of people very emphatically. They're like, you've been doing this for 20 years. You need to let your nervous system calm down. Even if you think you're calmed down, give it a couple more months. Everything will look different. So I took that seriously. And then I also uh, assigned myself to have good conversations with people that I felt aligned with and that I hadn't had enough time with in the last 5 years, and that to say yes to opportunities of talking to more people, going to more events, going to conferences, and just see what happens. And in that, I've just kept having amazing conversations, meeting people that inspire me and that help unlock new ideas. And then they'll pass me on to somebody else and say, oh, you have to meet this person. And I have this feeling like a path will open up for me by doing that. It will still be in psychedelics and mental health. I really feel passionately that we are part of mental health, and that we need to step up into that and not be something that's a fringe. I want to see this be an area of medicine and medical research that is really well respected within the mental health field, actually beyond mental health. Because I'm like thinking about this, like I said, for people that want to open different types of critical periods. I think there's that goes beyond just mental health. It goes into wholeness. How do we help support people in being whole? And a lot of people talk about interventional psychiatry, but I think about this as experiential medicine, something a little bit broader. And so I want to find what's my place in that? How do I help that happen?
I like that phrase. You mentioned it before, experiential medicine. I think that it perfectly encompasses the actual experience. It
Yeah.
is an experience to take this medicine. It is a journey. It is a deep dive, and it is unlike any other medicine that when we use that same term that we're currently aware of. So I
Yeah.
love that modifier, experiential medicine. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you so much for being part of Psychedelic Divas. It's been a joy to get to know you better and to introduce you to my listeners.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give a big shout out to everyone for listening and for being on this learning journey together. If you found this valuable in any way, please share it with those you know. And if you have a second, I know I always ask this, but maybe you'll actually do it right this second. Give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up wherever you're listening. And if you want to be part of this ongoing journey with me, please consider going to psychedelicdivas.com and sharing your email address. Believe me, I know email sucks, so I promise not to spam you. But it is the most reliable way to stay in touch with me since social media sometimes pulls down psychedelic accounts at their whim. So thank you for considering joining my mailing list. I promise not to abuse it. And thank you to everyone for growing together. Amy, what a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. It was really a joy to talk about this with you and share my experience.
All right. And I look forward to more hikes. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next episode.